What if the weakest-looking person in a hospital carried a past powerful enough to stop an entire building cold? The automatic doors slid open as the old man stepped inside, leaning slightly on a worn cane, his breathing measured, controlled. His coat was outdated, his shoes scuffed, and in his hand he held a thin, creased envelope he never let go of. People glanced once, then looked away. To them, he was invisible already. At the reception desk, the tone was immediate, sharp, rushed, dismissive. "You'll have to wait," the nurse said without looking up, fingers tapping the counter with irritation. The waiting room was half empty, yet his name wasn't called. Minutes stretched, then more. A quiet comment floated behind the desk, not meant for him but loud enough to land. "These people always come without paperwork." A soft laugh followed. He didn't argue, he didn't complain. He stood there with a posture that didn't match his age, straight-backed, still, disciplined. When asked to sit, he nodded once and obeyed. When told to move, he moved. There was no confusion in his eyes, only patience shaped by something older than this room. Something learned long before hospitals felt intimidating. A young orderly brushed past him, muttering that he was blocking the hallway. Another nurse sighed openly, rolling her eyes as if the man were an obstacle, not a human being. Someone whispered, "Why is he even here?" The word remove was said casually, like you'd say clean or dispose. The envelope slipped slightly from his fingers, revealing a corner stamped with faded ink. He noticed. He adjusted it, carefully, as if it mattered more than the pain that had brought him here in the first place. When a security guard was mentioned, half joking, half serious, he finally looked up. Not with fear, with recognition. As if he'd heard that tone before, in places far louder than this. No one asked about his past. No one wondered why his answers were precise, why he spoke only when spoken to, why his silence felt intentional rather than weak. The hospital hummed with routine indifference, unaware that its first mistake had already been made. And somewhere down the corridor, unseen and unheard, a clock started ticking toward a moment none of them were ready for. If this moment already made you feel that tight knot of injustice in your chest, pause for a second and stay with me. Stories like this aren't just about what happens next. They're about understanding why moments like these matter and how easily respect can be denied when appearances deceive. If you're following closely, let me know you're really getting it by leaving a comment below with your thoughts so far. Your perspective adds weight to this story. And if this kind of emotional, moral storytelling speaks to you, stories about honor, hidden strength, and justice finally taking its place, take a moment to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps these stories reach people who still believe respect must be earned, not assumed. They didn't just ignore him anymore. Now they wanted him gone. The old man was moved from one chair to another, then told to wait somewhere else, then told that place was also not appropriate. Each instruction came sharper than the last, wrapped in thinly veiled impatience. A nurse whispered to another that he was confused. A doctor glanced at his chart for less than 5 seconds, before closing it with a sigh, already decided. No tests yet. No urgency. No empathy. What made it worse wasn't the delay, it was the tone. The way people spoke about him while he was still sitting there. He probably doesn't even understand what's going on. These cases always turn into paperwork nightmares. We don't have time for this today. Each sentence landed like a small slap, and still, he said nothing. A junior doctor suggested moving him to another facility, something more appropriate. The word hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Appropriate for someone like him. Frail, old, disposable. The idea gained traction quickly. Suddenly, it wasn't about treatment anymore. It was about efficiency, about clearing space, about minimizing inconvenience. When a nurse tried to take the envelope from his hand, saying hospital policy didn't allow personal items, his grip tightened for the first time. Not aggressively, firmly, controlled. "I'll hold it," he said calmly. His voice was steady, unshaken, carrying a quiet authority that didn't belong in this room. And yet, no one noticed. Or worse, they ignored it. Security was mentioned again, this time without humor. A supervisor frowned, nodding slowly as if the problem were finally being addressed. The old man watched them with eyes that had seen fear before, real fear, and what he saw here didn't qualify. Still, something shifted in the air. The injustice was no longer passive, it was active now. A clipboard fell, papers scattered, one page slid across the floor and stopped near his shoe. A name was printed at the top. An old name. The kind of name people don't forget once they hear it, if they know what it means. He noticed it immediately. The nurse didn't. As they debated removing him for everyone's safety, the old man slowly stood up, despite the pain, despite the dizziness. "I can wait," he said, not asking, not pleading, just stating a fact. The room quieted for a brief second, not out of respect, but surprise. And in that silence, something unseen was already moving toward the hospital. A call, a file being opened, a past refusing to stay buried. The nurse bent down to gather the scattered papers, annoyed more by the disruption than concerned about what had fallen. She stacked them quickly, barely glancing at the headers, ready to shove them back onto the clipboard and move on. But one page stayed behind, half hidden under the old man's shoe. He noticed it instantly. He didn't rush. He didn't bend down right away. Instead, he waited until the nurse turned her back, then slowly reached for the paper with a care that felt almost ceremonial. His fingers trembled slightly, not from fear, but from age. Yet the movement itself was precise, practiced, as if even something this small deserved attention. At the top of the page was his full name, not the shortened version people usually used. The complete one. The one tied to a life most of these people wouldn't believe if they heard it. Beneath it sat a reference number. Old formatting, outdated by decades, and a small notation typed in faint ink. A notation most civilians wouldn't recognize. But to the right eyes, it meant everything. He slid the paper back under the clipboard when footsteps approached, returning to his seat without a word. No confrontation, no explanation. Silence again. But this time, it wasn't passive. It was deliberate. Down the hallway, a young intern frowned at the screen while reviewing a digital record that had just finished loading. "That's odd," she murmured. The system lagged, then refreshed. A warning symbol appeared briefly before disappearing. She leaned closer, scrolling back. The file didn't behave like the others. Portions were locked, archived, protected. That never happened for ordinary patients. She checked the timestamp, then the attached history. Her expression changed, not dramatically, but enough to matter. She stood up, hesitated, then sat back down. Doubt crept in. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe she was overthinking it. Still, she printed the page and folded it into her pocket instead of discarding it. Back in the waiting area, the old man closed his eyes for a moment, breathing slowly, grounding himself. Hospitals smelled the same everywhere, antiseptic and urgency. But this one felt louder somehow. Not in sound, but in arrogance. He'd faced chaos before. This was different. This was carelessness masquerading as authority. A supervisor returned with a forced smile, explaining that there would be additional delays and suggesting again that transfer might be best. As she spoke, her phone vibrated once. She ignored it. Then again. She frowned, checked the screen, and went pale. Across the room, the intern approached quietly and whispered something into her ear. Just a few words. Just enough. The supervisor's posture stiffened. Her smile vanished. She glanced toward the old man, really looked at him this time. And for the first time, uncertainty replaced irritation. Somewhere, far beyond the hospital walls, a secure line was ringing. A name had resurfaced, A record had been flagged, and the mistake they thought was minor had just become very, very serious. The supervisor cleared her throat and straightened the papers in her hands, as if order on the page could restore control in the room. Her uncertainty vanished behind a professional mask. "We're going to proceed differently," she announced, her voice firm but strained. Not kinder, just colder. The decision had already been made, and it wasn't in his favor. A senior physician was called over. He skimmed the chart quickly, his eyes moving faster than his judgment. "We can't justify immediate treatment," he said flatly. "His vitals are unstable, and without full verification, we're exposing ourselves to liability." The words sounded official, responsible, but beneath them was something else. Avoidance. The old man listened carefully. He always did. When the doctor mentioned liability, something flickered in his eyes, recognition again. He had heard men hide behind procedure before. He knew what it meant when rules were used to escape responsibility. Still, he said nothing. The physician continued, louder now, as if volume equaled authority. He suggested postponing pain management, delaying imaging, even canceling the consult that had been tentatively approved. Each choice pushed the risk further onto the old man's shoulders. When a nurse hesitated and mentioned the patient's age, the doctor cut her off. "Exactly," he snapped. "That's why we need to be cautious." Cautious. The word echoed cruelly. The pain finally showed on the old man's face, not dramatically, not with cries or pleading, but in the tightening of his jaw, the way his hand pressed briefly against his side before returning to rest on the envelope. He breathed through it, controlled it. The way he had learned long ago when stopping meant something far worse than discomfort. A stretcher was rolled past him, then stopped. Security stood nearby now, arms crossed, watching. Not protecting him, watching him. The implication was clear. If he became inconvenient, he would be removed. For order. For safety. For everyone else. The intern who had noticed the file earlier stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sir, maybe we should wait. There's something unusual about—" "That's enough," the physician interrupted sharply. "We are not delaying the entire department for one unverified patient." The room went quiet. Not the calm kind. The dangerous kind. The kind that comes right before something breaks. The old man slowly lifted his head and met the doctor's eyes. "I understand," he said softly. No accusation. No anger. Just truth. "I'll wait." But his hand trembled now. Not from weakness, but from pain he was no longer allowed to escape. In that moment, a distant sound cut through the hallway. Footsteps. Fast. Purposeful. Not rushed. Commanded. Phones buzzed again. This time, no, one ignored them. Because the system had made its final mistake. And somewhere above them, a decision far heavier than liability had already been issued. The ringing cut through the corridor like an alarm no one had prepared for. A secure phone vibrated against the supervisor's hip, the kind of device rarely used and never ignored. She glanced at the screen, expecting administration. Instead, her face drained of color. She stepped away, answering in a lowered voice that quickly turned rigid. "Yes, sir," she said. Then again, softer. "Understood." Across the room, conversations stalled. A nurse stopped mid-step. The physician who had spoken so confidently moments earlier watched the supervisor's posture change. Shoulders squared, spine straightened, not with authority, but with obedience. When the call ended, she didn't speak right away. She swallowed. "Where is he?" she asked, no longer pointing, no longer dismissive. Her eyes scanned the waiting area until they landed on the old man. The way she looked at him now was different. Careful, measured, almost afraid. The intern's printed page was pulled from a pocket and handed over, unfolded with shaking fingers. The supervisor read it once, then again. Each line tightened her jaw further. "Clear the hallway," she said abruptly. No explanation. No debate. Security moved without question. The physician opened his mouth to protest, but the supervisor cut him off with a look that said this was no longer his decision. "You need to step back," she told him. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight now, borrowed weight. In the distance, the elevator chimed. A private line had been opened. Authorization codes were exchanged. Names were confirmed. A past thought buried had been verified by someone who still remembered exactly what it meant. The old man remained seated, eyes forward, breathing slow. He didn't look surprised, only tired. As if he had always known this moment would come, just not here. Not like this. Voice echoed from the end of the corridor, sharp, commanding, unmistakable. Orders were given, not requests. Staff straightened instinctively, years of conditioning kicking in before conscious thought. "Where is he?" the voice demanded again, closer now. No one answered immediately, not because they didn't know, but because suddenly no one wanted to admit what they had done. The doors at the far end opened, and the atmosphere shifted. The doors swung open with a force that didn't need to be, loud to command attention. A tall man in full uniform stepped into the corridor, his presence cutting through the hospital like a blade. Every insignia on his chest carried weight, but it was his posture that froze the room. Straight, controlled, absolute. Conversations died instantly. Phones disappeared into pockets. People stood without being told. The general's eyes scanned the space once, not searching, assessing. He didn't ask for directions. He already knew where to go. His boots echoed. Against the floor, each step deliberate, measured, the sound of authority earned, not borrowed. When his gaze landed on the old man, everything else ceased to exist. He stopped a few feet away and saluted. Not casually, not out of courtesy, but with precision and respect so deep it stunned everyone watching. "Sir," he said, voice steady, unwavering. "I'm sorry it took so long." A collective breath caught in the room. Nurses stared. The physician's face tightened, confusion twisting into disbelief. Security guards shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether to stand straighter or disappear entirely. The old man rose slowly, pain etched across his face, but his back remained straight. He returned the salute, imperfect only because of age, not intention. "At ease," he replied quietly. That was all it took. The general turned, his expression hardening. "Who is responsible for his care?" he asked. No anger, no shouting, just a question weighted with consequences. No one answered. The silence was suffocating. I asked a question. The supervisor stepped forward, voice shaking. I was overseeing intake, sir." The general nodded once. "You will step aside." He addressed the room now. "This man is a decorated veteran. His service record is sealed for reasons none of you are cleared to know. What you are cleared to know is this. He outranks every civilian in this building, and his presence here is not a favor. It is a right." Faces drained of color. The physician swallowed. "Hard. Effective immediately," the general continued. "His treatment is my responsibility. Any delay, denial, or disrespect shown to him will be documented and reviewed at the highest level." He turned back to the old man, his tone softening. "Sir, we're ready now." Around them, no one spoke. No one moved. The power had shifted so fast it left the air ringing. And the hardest part was yet to come. The moment everyone would have to sit with what they'd done. No one spoke. No one even breathed, normally. The corridor that had been so loud with judgment just minutes earlier now felt hollow, like the air had been pulled out of it. Nurses avoided eye contact. The physician stared at the floor, his authority evaporated, replaced by something raw and uncomfortable. Exposure. This wasn't a reprimand behind closed doors. This was consequence, unfolding in front of everyone. The general didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "You judged him by how he looked," he said calmly. "You assumed weakness because it was convenient, and you nearly made a decision that would have followed you for the rest of your careers." Each sentence landed harder than shouting ever could. The old man was guided to a private room now, not rushed, not handled like a burden. Carefully, respectfully. Every door opened ahead of him. Every step was cleared. The same staff who had dismissed him earlier now scrambled to assist, their movements stiff, rehearsed, desperate to undo what couldn't be undone. As he passed the reception desk, the nurse who had rolled her eyes earlier froze. Their eyes met for half a second. He didn't glare. He didn't smile. He simply nodded. The quiet kind of acknowledgement that carries more weight than anger. That hurt more than any punishment. Inside the room, the general stayed behind while treatment finally began. "You shouldn't have had to wait," he said under his breath. The old man exhaled slowly. "I've waited before," he replied. "This wasn't the longest." Outside, the hospital returned to motion, but something fundamental had changed. Whispers followed. Stories spread. People spoke his name now, carefully, with respect, with shame. Because the lesson had been delivered in the most uncomfortable way possible. Authority doesn't announce itself. Honor doesn't beg. And the cost of disrespect is always higher than people expect. If you stayed with this story until the very last moment, it tells me something about you. It means you understand that. Respect isn't about appearances, titles on a screen, or first impressions. It's about character, history, and the choices people make when no one is watching. If this story made you feel that mix of anger, tension, and satisfaction when justice finally took its place, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Stories like this only reach the right people when you choose to be part of them. Hit the like button if you believe veterans deserve respect, not suspicion. And I want you to leave a comment below saying exactly this: never judge the quiet ones. That comment lets me know you truly understood the message behind the story. Now don't leave yet. The next video appearing on your screen carries a story just as powerful, where someone else was underestimated until the truth came out. Click it and keep watching.